So, welcome to the final panel for the Crush Virtual Eroticon event. We are so glad to have you. This is the LGBTQ plus inclusion is best, and we have these wonderful authors. Unfortunately, Barbara Wright had a family emergency; she's not able to make it today, so we will just have the three of us here. Two of them will be doing all the talking because they know way more than I do. Over in the Reader's Lounge, like we said, JA is our final author takeover at 4:10. And then we want to give a special thank you to the Sex Symbol Podcast for sponsoring the panel today. And if you're looking for a couple ladies who know how to shake it up, they're your gals. And then on to the beginning, on to the fun. What I immediately, like, this is not a part of my script, but what I immediately loved about the panelists that we have today is Kelly and I came up with questions that we liked, but this isn't our thing. And we sent them, and these two wonderful authors came back and like, I think we can make this a little better. And I love the questions that they came up with. And so I hope you all love them too, because I think they were very insightful and quite useful. And I was like, at first I was like, oh, they didn't like our questions. So I'm like, yeah, these are just so much better. So, anyways, so I hope you all like it too. All right, the first question, let's go to Reba first. As an author of the LGBTQ plus fiction, what are some of the assumptions that stores, newsletters, and advertisers make?
I think one of the frustrating things about trying to advertise in these genres, when you have things that can be advertised, is you can't really do the kind of niching down sometimes that you can do in other types of work. So, for example, one of my pens, I write midlife romance. I can go on Facebook and choose, women who are between, 35 and 50 and like romance, right? I can niche that down, but on Facebook, you can't really niche down into things like lesbian or transgender because, there's a lot of hate crimes and things that happen online. So it makes it a little more difficult. And then also, something that comes up a lot is there might be a newsletter, a paid newsletter spot that says we take LGBTQ. That's a lot of letters, right? Like that's not all the same demographic. And they might have a lot of, for example, male readers, but they might not have any lesbian or sapphic readers in the group. So it's really hard to sort of figure out what's the best place to reach your readers for your particular niche.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, I didn't really ever think about that. But yeah, that definitely makes sense. Ezra, what's your take on it?
I guess I think it's kind of a mixed bag because on one hand, for things like keywords, it's a little bit easier than my just I have some other pen names too, but so the pen names that have like the LGBTQ characters, that adds a little bit of ease for keywords and searching and things like that because it's a smaller niche. But at the same time, I agree with Reba that it can be challenging if you want to try to target those readers outside of keyword searchable things. So, like, with a reader magnet, it's pretty easy because people might be searching for the keyword in their when they're finding other newsletters to join. But with like doing a broader ad where you're trying to reach people who aren't part of that community, that's where it starts to be a little bit more difficult, I think.
Yeah, I think we all, especially in today's world, are having to get a little more creative with everything that we're doing advertising, but this definitely would make it hard. So let's do this next question to Ezra first. Many people assume that LGBTQ individuals are the target audience for LGBTQ fiction. That's not always the case. What type of audiences read these stories?
Well, I think it is, yeah. I think, it also relates to genre. So most romance readers are women. So if you're writing erotic romance or something with a romantic plot, you're probably mostly targeting women, whether you're writing gay romance or sapphic or any other queer romance. That's just the reader of that genre. In erotica, you probably find more readers who are, like men reading the gay erotica or whatever. But in romance, it's still like a really female dominated um, genre. And for me, like I write pretty spicy erotic romance. I started with erotica and I just kept like adding romance plots to all my books. So, I'm definitely targeting a lot of women, but I know a lot of men read my books too because I get feedback from them. And I write under Kristen Lance, I write MMF. So it's like bisexual guys and a woman. And then under Ezra Dao, I write just gay romance, romance. Uh, yeah, so I guess that's true. And then in Sapphic, which is what Reba writes, you know, there's those two different targets too. If you're looking at Sapphic romance, it's probably is women, bisexual women, or gay women. Sapphic erotica is a little bit like watching lesbian porn, where it's kind of like a lot of it is male gaze um, versus designed for women. So I guess does that clear it up? I don't know.
Yeah, Reba, what is your take?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's and I think part of the challenge as an author is just trying to figure out who is your gaze and who are you writing for. So, as Reba Bale, I write sapphic romance, primarily lesbian romance, and it's pretty high heat, particularly some of my series. But I also write lesbian erotica under a pen named Josie Bale. Um, my little sister kind of pen name. And when I write for Josie, I'm thinking about how does a male who wants to see, sorry to say it like this, two women getting it on, what does that look like differently versus when I'm writing my romances where there's a little bit more emotion and a little bit more, for me anyway, more story development. And sapphic, so I saw somebody asked difference
Yeah, I
between
was
lesbian
gonna
and
ask
sapphic.
that.
Yeah, sapphic is more of a larger umbrella. It includes trans women and bi women and lesbians, where lesbians just women who are with women and are cisgender generally.
Thank you.
And I think also, shoot, I just thought of something. I think a lot of it is about attraction. So it's people enjoy reading about the gender they're attracted to or genders. So that's where the audience comes in. Like men enjoy reading lesbian erotica because they're straight, cis men enjoy it because they're attracted to women, so it's really the audience is based a lot on attraction, which can cause,
Yeah.
there's some variety there in versus the actual demographic that it's writing about.
Do you guys find that, like, let's say the that you have more women reading that than gay couples, gay men?
Yeah, well, I don't write that much that's straight erotica. So most of my Ezra Dao books are in the like fully into the romance genre, but they're erotic romance. So I do hear from men who read them, but it is a lot of women. But on Medium, sometimes I post like shorts, and I think in shorts there's a lot more men reading them. And it's sort of similar in all erotica and romance. Like that dividing line is often that the women want to read that full romantic arc with their smut, and the men sometimes just want like a short stroker story. And it's obviously a blurry line, and there's people who on both sides who like both things. But that's kind of the stereotype, I guess.
Megan brought up a good question in the chat. What about the lesbians who are interested in lesbian erotica? What would you say differentiates the tone?
You know, I
Um,
Yeah, I think just I don't want to like I don't wouldn't stereotype. I don't think I would necessarily differentiate the tone that much. But I think that the definition of erotica is so different from people. Like I just published a lesbian romance, but I would consider romance. It has maybe two sex scenes, and one of the first reviews I got was, "This is great erotica," and I'm like, "Whoa, this was really like more romantic." But in that person's perception, it was very erotic. But what Ezra said earlier about, what's the purpose of somebody reading it? If they're just kind of reading something to get off, it's a different kind of setup and development of a story versus somebody who really wants to see the progression of a relationship, regardless of whether it has erotic elements or not.
And I also think that there are men who write, and I don't know, there's always a joke about men writing women, but there are men who write lesbian erotica, and that will be uh pretty heavily male gaze, like the, I don't know, she breasted boobily down the stairs kind of stuff. Um, but but like, and I'm not saying that all men who write lesbian erotica do that or anything like that, but that's kind of that stereotype for the super male gaze. But I think um that men who enjoy reading lesbian erotica would enjoy reading either one from a female author or the male gaze, depending on their preferences.
I think that's a really good answer. It makes me think of lots of other questions, but I'm gonna stick to the ones you guys emailed me. um, and others, how can others of others genres incorporate LGBTQ plus characters into their books? I think it means
Um,
how can others in other genres? It's just
yeah, so I think Reba wrote this question, but I think the idea was to talk a little bit about sort of not doing the stereotype of the gay best friend, but coming up with other ways to include LGBTQ characters so that you're showing diversity. And for me, showing diversity is really important because, I'm a white cis woman, but my husband is Chinese American and my kids are biracial. And so that just, as I started as an author, made me think of like, I want to portray the world around me where I know people of different races and I know people of different sexualities and gender identities. And just to like, kind of weave that diversity into the fabric of your story instead of like throwing a stereotype in there, um, just to have that stereotype. Uh, and I was just guessing what Reba meant. Reba, I don't know if you know, but Reba, Lacey, and I are kind of all author besties, so we're all like chatting in the background
yeah. I
when we
mean, I
were
got your guys'
planning
name
this.
because of Lacey. She's
Yeah,
the one that threw you guys to me. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I guess Reba can give her take on it too, because I
Yeah, no,
just
I agree.
assume.
I think that kind of in popular culture, there's so many of these like gay best friends or this kind of stereotypical, very masculine presenting lesbian. And the spectrum of sexuality is so much longer and wider than that. And, it's very rare that I see in sort of popular fiction. That somebody is asexual or gender non-binary. So I think to the extent that we can sort of normalize in fiction that there is a spectrum of identities and there is a spectrum of sexuality. And I also believe that many authors maybe shy away from that because they don't want to fetishize somebody or they don't want to get it wrong. But there are ways that you can do that by, really like using sensitivity readers or spending some time reading from folks in the community and learning from their voices what the spectrum is.
And I also think bisexuality is one that gets erased a lot, so a lot of romance or erotica that's between just a man and a woman uh, just ignores the fact that some of them could be bisexual in that relationship. So that's one that could be interesting to explore as a writer.
I agree. I think that especially for females who are bisexual, as a person myself who identifies as bisexual, I think that like I rarely see a story that kind of transcends that. Like I see, periodically sort of the mental struggle of men who are bisexual, but the female bisexuality is a little bit less prevalent, at least that I've seen.
Thank you. Gabby had a question that I think is worth is do you find the LGBT plus community prefers to read from authors who also identify as LGBT?
I think that because the readers of male are so often female, they don't really care. There's a little bit more sensitivity about that in the lesbian community for sure. There was a situation maybe about a year ago where an author was pretending to be a lesbian and talking all the time about being a lesbian, and it turned out that they were a cis straight man. And that the reader community of lesbian romance were just like irate. They were really upset and they felt very betrayed, understandably. So I think that it really goes back to who's reading it. In the sapphic community, I think there's a way more interest in reading stories by people who are from the community than there is in perhaps some of the other genres.
There's been a big push. There's been a big push from the like gay male community to try to get more gay men writing gay romance too. So I think it's coming across. But I also think that part of it is if you write a good story and it's a sensitive story, then they'll enjoy it and read it. And your main goal should be to be honest, like Reba said, like don't pose as something you're not, and to be upfront. So I'm clear on my social media that I'm a woman, even though I used a kind of gender neutral name for my pen name, and people kind of sometimes assume I'm a man, but I'm honest about it and open about it, and I have plenty of gay male readers as well. So I think there is some dialogue about it, but it's not like a hard and fast line.
Do you think it's because authors, if they are part of that community, they understand the emotions and everything, so they write a better story, is why they prefer to read it? Or is it because they want to support people of that?
Well, the criticism, so it is partially just about supporting people within their own community. But the biggest criticisms that I see, and I'm sure it's the same in sapphic and lesbian written by men, is there's a lot of there's a lot of male sex that doesn't involve lube or doesn't involve any kind of prep, or it's like unrealistic and fetishizing the man who's a bottom into kind of almost a female character, I guess. So there are some real criticisms out there. So I think the best thing you can do if you're not LGBTQ and are interested in writing in that genre is to get on social media and follow those people who are criticizing, and you can hear what they're saying and just incorporate that into your writing. Make sure you're being sensitive to like, what is it like to have anal sex? Like, I'm a woman, I know what it feels like, and I know like you don't want to just stick a huge dick in there, and like it's not that hard to be sensitive, basically. And I think that's where some of the criticism, it's the same criticism as the men writing women who write women like with weirdly perked breasts that do stuff. It's just like, just be sensitive to who you're writing, listen to those people, how they feel, how they think. And I think that clears up a lot of problems.
And I think this is part of this, I know you, part of the name of the panel is Representation Matters. And I've become friends with another sapphic author. And it was fun because we became friends on a Discord where I was using a different name than Reba Bale. And when we got to be friends and I mentioned what my pen name was, she got really excited. And she said, and she'd been writing about a year, and she writes lesbian romance. And she said, you're like the first lesbian romance author I found. And I started reading your books and I thought, oh, I could do this as a woman of color who's lesbian. I could write my own experiences and my own stories, because I found your books first, however, that person happened to find them. And I think that's true for a lot of folks. They might see my book or they might see Ezra's or they'll see somebody else's book and then they'll be like, hey, maybe I can do this better. And you know what? If they can do it better than us, that's awesome, right? They have their different experiences than Ezra and I have with our own different identities as well.
That makes total sense to me. Okay, your next question. The LGBTQ plus character led books are exploding in popularity. Why do you think this is happening? Why is it important?
Your mic was
I
cutting
think,
out.
yeah. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Sorry, the headphone died. Okay, so I'll repeat it. The LGBTQ plus character-led books are exploding in popularity in many genres. Why do you think this is happening and why is it important?
Well, to me, I think it's happening because of indie publishing, honestly, because for so long, trad publishers have kind of held the status quo, and uh, with indie publishers, with indie publishing, authors can write their experiences, they can write people they know, people in their lives. And so suddenly you see an explosion of diversity in books, and the trad publishers are kind of scrambling to pick up certain authors who are getting popular and things like that. And realizing that these books can sell, because I think before indie publishing um, exploded more, before people started to accept indie books and be able to get them and they were easily accessible, that the trad publishers were just assuming, like, trans people are only a small percentage of people, so it's just not worth it for us to publish a book about a trans person more than once a year, or whatever it is. So now, you know, people are enjoying reading more diversity, and even people who are just straight white people are enjoying reading diversity and learning about other people's experiences. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think, with the gatekeeping aspect's not there in indie publishing. And as people find things that they like, they become voracious readers. And that's another thing about indie publishing. Like, I can typically I write novella length, just with that caveat, but I can publish a book every month or two. And, in traditional publishing, I maybe would publish a book every 2 years. So, there's people who are hungry for, my books or somebody's books, and we can continue to produce content in a way that keeps people engaged. And yeah, our books aren't at the grocery store on the rack of books, but they are getting read and they are getting purchased, and people are really grateful to have them. And that's what gives me personal satisfaction, is knowing that, connecting with my readers and knowing that they like the things that are coming out of my head.
Yeah. There's a comment that I think is worth talking about. Alex from Talking Kink with Alex and Ellie. One of the things I've seen is people wanting more bisexual representation, but upset when that representation is through flings and not real emotional bonds, because it leans to the bi people are just horn dogs whom any hole works. What's your take on that?
I think it could be a problem in I don't know. I write a lot of, like, one of my main genres is bisexual, so, and it probably has a little bit of the horn dogs, but all my characters are horn dogs, so that's okay. Um, but I think one of the things is, like, a lot of is like with bisexual representation, it's okay to represent a bisexual person in a straight relationship without having them, want to also have sex with the same gender person in the same book, and I think that might be part of the problem with that or part of the cause of that is like, how do we show they're bisexual without making them like, ooh, that woman's hot and that man's hot and that one, but I think just making them like a normal person, and right now they're attracted to the character they're attracted to, and they're not uh focused on every single person of that gender. And I think it's a fallback, sort of like a crutch, to make them to show their bisexuality through actually depicting their attraction, which can probably be upsetting to bisexual people, I would imagine.
Before we go on, I'd like to pause for the moment and say what our eighth and final scavenger hunt word is. So if you're ready, it is undulate, undulate. So that is our eighth word. Please go and fill out the scavenger hunt link so we can give this giveaway to one of you wonderful people. We will have it coming up within the hour because it's, 20 minutes away. But undulate. We can continue now, sorry. The hundo word, Vivian. Undulate, undulate. You have to go up and down.
Do people have to spell it right?
No, you don't have to spell it
Starts
right.
with a U, Gabriella. With a U.
Yeah, spell with a U, but no, you don't have to spell it right. Okay, let's
Getting
see.
back to your question about bisexual, I think what Ezra said earlier is important. It's hard to sort of have that identity. So one of the things I've done with some of my sapphic romances is just have them like as if it's like not even like anything you have to. It's not a thing, like a little bit like I used to be married to this guy, or I used to be married, I used to be with this guy, and now I'm with you. Although I did one time have a scene where the person who was bisexual was teasing the person who'd been lesbian that they were gold star lesbian. If you're not familiar about that term, that's a lesbian who's never slept with a man ever. So they were kind of joking around like, oh, well, you're bisexual, but I'm a gold star lesbian, so just kind of taking the sort of stigma out of it, like whatever, this is you and this is me, and this is how we're engaging with each other now in this relationship, and it doesn't really matter what happened before.
So I've never heard of the gold star lesbian before. Like, how did that come about?
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of kind of terms in the lesbian community, which is a community that I'm most familiar with, and gold star lesbian is one of them.
Oh,
There's a term for it. I can't remember it. There's a term for it in the gay community too. It's just like it, and it's
Golden gay.
I don't know. It's like associating a stigma with anyone who has been with a woman. So uh like, they're not gay enough or whatever. So there are some issues that bisexual people face in the real world. So I think it's good to include bisexual characters and address that.
yeah, I learned a lot in this 20 minutes. Wow. Okay, you guys, the last one, it looks more like just a topic to talk about, not so much a question, but many authors write both romance and erotica, and there's an assumption that erotica isn't good writing. Many of us have been dismissed by by other authors when they hear we write erotica. Oh my God, I can't talk. I'm dyslexic. Sorry. Reading out loud is very hard for me. What are your thoughts?
It's super frustrating. I have, I don't know, 3 or 4 pen names, and I think Ezra has like 117 of them, and they're all different. And I was
I
at,
only
for
have like
example,
7.
okay. I was
That
at
was close.
you all know the 20 Books conference that happens in Las Vegas every year. I was at the 20 Books conference, and I sat at a table, and they were like, well, what do you write? And I said, oh, I write various types of romance, you thinking about all my pen names, and erotica. And I could just see their faces. They were just like, oh, wow. And then I'm like, well, what do you write? And one of them wrote space opera, which I would argue is sort of like men's romance. And then one of them wrote like spy thrillers or something. And I was just it really just struck me then and other times that, that there's this hierarchy of what you write, but in erotica particularly, it's just, there's seems to be no respect. People will say, well, erotica doesn't have any story. erotica doesn't, have quality writing. And, I would argue that's not true. And there are many people who write very good erotica, some with more of a story than less of a story, but there's a story.
I think that it comes down to like sex positivity and, you know, like like even in romance you see a hierarchy of people who are like, you know, write their clean romance or whatever that doesn't have any sex at all in it because they need to find love through character driven whatever. And and I think it's just a cultural thing for erotica and erotic romance where um people are looked down upon and don't acknowledge how much of a connection and everything is forged during sex. So, and it is a hierarchy of people looking down upon each other. And there's also some sexism in it because the female dominated genres tend to be the ones looked down upon, like romance authors. But yeah, so somebody just said the misogyny stuff. So because, you know, women enjoy sexy romance and that's their porn, and they're not acknowledging that women are reading yes, they find it like sexy, but it's like an emotional journey like any other book. Even the shortest erotica can be an emotional journey. So I think yes, I don't know. I don't know where I was going with
Well,
that.
I mean, I think that's a good point. It's not about the length that gets you there. It's just the journey. And it doesn't
Yes.
you can have a 50,000 word novel that's written well with no pull of your heart, or a 3,000 word that just brings you to tears. Like, I
And I
think
also think
Yeah.
that
that's
the
important.
rise of ebooks has really been helpful for people exploring their own interests and their own sexuality because, probably no one would go to, Walmart and buy a book that said, I I loaned out my wife, or I'm a
Right.
cuckold or something, but nobody sees what you buy. So you can just kind of explore whatever sounds interesting to you. And sometimes I've downloaded books because they've come up in some way or another in a newsletter or something. And I've been like, wow, I didn't even know I was into this until I read it, So I think it really helps open people's experience and helps also know that maybe they're not alone with things that maybe they thought was shameful that they were into, that other people are into as well.
Yeah, I think the reality is that it the
Places.
reading gives people a safe place to explore, but the reality is different from the stereotype, which is like that we're writing Pornhub but books. Um so yeah.
Yeah. I think we should all take a moment to acknowledge Lacey's comment. Nobody sees the dinosaur erotica, which is in the grand prize and the scavenger hunt dinosaur erotica.
Oh,
Awesome.
Yes. Stegosaurus something. I don't remember. There's too many titles.
or
Anyways.
now there's all the inanimate object erotica, like the Chuck Tingle, my library card.
Yeah. So I think at this point we should open it up to questions and see what people are dying to know. Um, who wants to go first? Don't everyone talk at once.
Oh, Bruce is asking if it's possible for gender switching without being offensive to transgender folk. I don't know. Maybe I would talk to some transgender people about that. I do think that their gender swapping is a kink and is a kink that people write about. And I don't think it's the same as transgender because they're just gender swapping stories are about experiencing what it would be like to be a woman if you're a man or vice versa, which is not about your identity. You're still a man in a woman's body. So I think I would be careful with that, versus writing a transgender person. And transgender people are highly fetishized. So if you wanted to write trans stories, I would be extra cautious and talk to trans people and, all of that.
Vivian has a comment or question. Do you write from other genders' perspective other than what you identify as? And if you do, how do you channel that? It's a good
I
question.
do. Yeah, I do because I write stories and I'm a woman, and I also write MMF stories with I started with MMF, which is like bisexual men and a woman. And I do write the male point of view. And I think, I don't know, just listening to people and paying attention to people and how they communicate and talk and the things they say they're thinking is just important. And I think it's probably important for any kind of writing. Um, but if you're writing a character that's different from you in any way, you know, if one thing with the advent of like TikTok and social media, if you want to know what somebody's thinking about any topic, you can like go on TikTok and watch a bunch of videos where people rant about it. So, you know, you can get a lot of perspectives really quickly and really easily about what people think and how people behave and, you know, how that associates with their gender identity.
And I also think, as authors, we're also we're giving people fantasy as well. So, for example, when my pen name that writes male female romance, it may be that a straight hetero cisgendered male would read the men that I write and be like, no man would say that or think that. But it's sort of the fantasy of what women maybe want their men to think about. So there's also just a little bit of giving people the fantasy. A lot of stuff that happens in fiction would never happen in real life, we know, right? Like I was reading a book where there was a group of straight men who were doing a book club of romance because their wives were into romance. And I was like, oh, that would
Oh, I
never.
read that series.
Yeah. I was like, that's never going to happen. But, we wish it would happen because they would understand, and those of us who would have men in our lives, maybe we'd appreciate them understanding us a little better. So,
Yeah, and I think there's some suspension of disbelief there where you're writing characters who are like you're writing erotica, you're writing characters who are probably like hornier than most people. You know, they're obviously more impulsive and more ready to jump in than most people. You know, but that's part of the fantasy. The fantasy is like, well, what if I actually went with this like one horny thought that I just had the other day, and like took it to its full extent. And that's kind of what you're writing.
So Rachel has a statement and then a question. She says, when I have a gay or lesbian character, I write them like any other character. If they see someone as hot or cute, the response is just like anyone else's. My LGBTQ plus friends are chill in that way that it is not a thing. I love them just how they are. Her question, am I underthinking it as a writer?
No, that sounds right. To
yeah.
me, I'd say they're just people and they respond in the same way as people, and actually like treating them just like you would respond. You know, if you're writing a gay man and you're showing him attracted to a hot guy and you're a woman, you can think about the things that you think when you're attracted to a hot guy. You know, like that's we're all just people, and I think that's making it about their sexuality is where you get too much into fetishizing. Um, you know, so that sounds on point to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good answer. And people are people, right? I mean, I know it's kind of trite to say that, but we all have had that moment where we see someone and we're like, whoa, that's a good looking person. And I don't think that is differentiated by someone's expression of their gender or sexuality.
Anyone else have any comment or question to add? I mean, I think this was a great panel. I mean, I learned a lot and I mean, I loved it. Does anyone else have anything? Well, if not, I'm gonna go ahead and close this up and then we can head back. Oh, wait. Yes, the special word is undulate.
You do not have spelled correctly. So, so thanks for spending the last 40 minutes with us. We're going to start the giveaway soon. It's actually very convenient. We're closing a little early. That way I can go do the scavenger hunt and do some stuff. But if you want to hang out just for a little while, there'll be a lot of winners coming up. And hopefully you're leaving this panel with a little more understanding. And we will see each other shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting this.
Of course.